Thank you. Hey, it's my pleasure to be here with you today, to see some old friends, literally old friends like me, and some new friends, and our friends from the federal government and state government. And what has been fun about this initiative, as well as just the cybercrime division, has been our ability to work with you on the things that you need, because we get our inspiration and our impetus for the kinds of trainings that we do based upon what's happening out in the field and what you tell us you're interested in, and I want to continue to try and do that. It occurred to me, and as Tom was talking about this, I started as an assistant district attorney in 1986 up in Lowell, where we were more concerned about possession of a needle and homicide and motor vehicle. And if you told me that in 2010 we'd be focused on cyberbullying, I would have thought you'd be talking about a new Arnold Schwarzenegger movie or something. At that stage, we didn't even have computers. I actually may have had one, but it was in a box on my floor. And around 1990, somebody said they sent me an email, and I said, "What's that?" And so you can see how far I have come. And I do appreciate how important it is. As you know, not only are there substantive crimes that take up a lot of your time and energy around computers, but most of what you do now involves some use of digital evidence, whether it's violation of a restraining order or investigating a homicide. And Tom knows this because in our office, we had a horrible homicide back in the year 2000, the day after Christmas, and it involved a workplace homicide, 7 people gunned down by a man named Michael McDermott. And although it was a homicide, we would not have been able to investigate and prove it without doing all kinds of computer search warrants to figure out, because he said he was lacking criminal responsibility, what his train of thought was and what his motives were. And I'll tell you one little piece that's always been of interest to me. He claimed that he did not understand what was happening, that he was actually transported back into pre-World War II Germany, and he was killing Germans to save the Jews. He was a large, unruly guy. He looked a little crazy, frankly. But through the course of the case, we believe that despite the fact that he had some history, and we acknowledge that he had planned this, and he had actually planned this defense of lacking criminal responsibility. And there was one key piece of evidence, among others, because we did a computer search, and we found that he had done his own Google search on how to fake a mental illness. And when that was one of the pieces of evidence we gave to the jurors, as well as others, books he had bought that tried to teach him how those tests work, we were able to get a first-degree murder conviction in that case. And frankly, I know that you are all here today. How many of you are school resource officers, by the way? So a lot, but not everybody. You are all here today because you know in your communities, in your schools, you want to be able to have your best foot going forward on what is increasingly a social problem and potentially a criminal problem. But I hope that as we go forward, we will remember to keep our common sense about these issues and try and work on the front end with common sense around understanding that kids are still kids. And some of this behavior is best dealt with, I think, as Maura mentioned earlier, at the school level with school disciplinary codes, and to be able to make the distinction when that behavior moves into the criminal realm. But I certainly think that this is as much a challenge for you as community policers as you've ever had, because this is an increasing problem. And when we have 2 young people who've committed suicide in the last year, I think we all recognize the harm that happens. What I want to stress to you today is that, and I know Dr. Englander is going to talk about this, for every child who goes to school who is being bullied, the effect on that kid, whether it's for that day or for years or into an adulthood, can be traumatic and lasting and can interfere with that child's ability to do well in school. And I think it's incumbent upon us as adults, as people who care about what happens to our kids in communities and in our schools, to say, this is not acceptable. We appreciate the give and take of kids. We all were kids, we have kids, we know when it goes beyond what is appropriate. And what we're focusing on today is because of the use of technology, the ability to do 24/7 kinds of bullying is what makes this so important. Tom mentioned this when I first took office. And let's go to, when I first took office, I thought it was important that we focus on digital evidence and what role it was going to play. This is our 38th training since that cybercrime initiative, and I'm proud to say we've now trained over 7,000 law enforcement professionals in the 3 years since we've done this. I also note very quickly that when I first started working in the child abuse unit, and we started to get in more pornography cases online, I started to see the connection between the work we did protecting children from abuse and neglect and criminal abuse, sexual and physical, and serious emotional abuse. And that was part of my job for a long time. And I began to see that our job to protect kids from abuse, whether it's from a caretaker, a softball coach, or from their peers, remains the same. And the ways in which we approach that and the ways in which we have tools to do it, I think, require us to think about that as keeping kids safe. And how can we do that as good police officers, as those who work as victim witness advocates, as child abuse prosecutors, and how we do that. I do know that one thing has changed. When we used to do these conferences back in 1986, we could afford the whole muffins. I don't know if anybody saw, all we had was muffin tops today. I guess the budget is really tough. But we're going to continue to try and bring you the kinds of training that will help you do your job. And I hope that we will make this interactive because you will let us know what you need to do. And so we are addressing this topic. And there's no question as we talk about the cyberbullying piece. And don't ever forget that we're talking about behavior, and then that same behavior when it takes place basically online, what happens. What makes it different is because it's so pervasive and because it is much more invasive. What do I mean? We know that all of our kids have cell phones, one or two. I read an article the other day that said even kids in kindergarten are coming into school with cell phones. And so this technology for these digital natives is very different from at least the way we grew up, and it's important to understand the role it plays in their lives, in their development, and it's important for us to understand the technology on it. I know I've likened it to, for parents who are my generation or even younger who didn't grow up as digital natives, it's akin to the generation of adults who came over to this country who did not speak English. And the kids who went to school and knew English were the ones who ran the household. To some extent, that is true for parents and teachers who do not understand what their kids are doing on Facebook or MySpace, don't understand the texting and all the stuff that kids do. So it's important that we understand that and the cultural piece that goes along with it and what we need to do to address it. We also know it's 24/7. Hey, if you were bullied in the schoolyard 15 years ago, you could leave the schoolyard. You could go home and your tormenting would stop. And maybe you would bring some bigger kids back with you the next day because you knew when and where that confrontation might take place. You also knew who your bully was because you would see them in school and you could identify them. And if you had a responsible adult in the schoolyard with you, they also knew who it was. This is totally different, right? It happens 24/7, around the clock, and it may often be anonymous, and it becomes viral. And it becomes for kids who are insecure or not doing well in school, who are concerned about their looks, who are concerned about how they're different, which all kids are, always are, just as adults are. It becomes intolerable for some of these kids. And when we recognize that for some kids it results in suicide, we have to recognize how intolerable that really was. And the range of kids up to that who suffer from it, it's silence, and they think they have no place to go. So it's incredibly important, I think, that we continue to address it.